Hello and welcome to the unit on database management. This unit consists of 20 marks and this is the part 13 of this particular unit. Today I am going to discuss about constraints in SQL, and out of all the constraints we are going to discuss about primary key, unique key, not null and default constraint. So let's begin our discussion on constraints in SQL. So this is the syllabus. Out of the syllabus we are going to discuss the part which is highlighted, and along with that I am going to discuss about default constraints also. So let us begin our discussion on constraints. So what do we mean by constraints? So till now whatever tables we have created in SQL, there were no restrictions on those tables. Alright, but with the help of constraints, what we can do, we can apply some restriction on the data values that can be inserted into the tables. So a constraint may be defined as a condition or check applicable on a field or set of fields. So a condition will be given in the columns, and if the condition is violated, then we will not allow the database administrator to insert values into the tables. These are used to specify rules for the data in a table. Constraints, these are basically used to specify some kind of rules for the data that are inserted in the table. So as I have already said, if there is any violation in the applied constraint and data inserted, the action is aborted. So if you have given some kind of constraint into a particular table and you have violated the constraint, then whatever data you are trying to insert, it cannot be inserted, and the action that you are trying to do, that means insertion of data, that action is aborted. That means that action is stopped. So it will be more clear when we go for the practical aspect of the constraints. So this is basically the syntax on constraints. So all of us know how to create a table, a simple table in SQL. So if we want to give the constraint, generally what happens, just after the data type, we will write the name of the constraint which we are going to apply. Okay. So remember, constraints is some kind of condition or check which is applicable on a field or set of fields. Basically, it's a kind of restriction that is given for data insertion. Let's move on to the types of constraints. Basically, these are the following types of constraints. First is not null constraint, then primary key constraint, then unique constraint, then default constraint, and finally we have foreign key constraint. In this part of our discussion, we will be confined to not null, primary key, unique and default constraint. So let us begin our discussion with the first type of constraint, which is the not null constraint. So all of us know the meaning of the word null. What is the meaning of the word null? Null means empty. So what is the meaning of not null? Not null means something cannot be empty. So this constraint ensures that a particular column or a group of columns cannot take null values. So if you are keeping a column as not null, then this constraint ensures that you cannot leave that particular column blank. You have to insert some values into that particular column. If a column is specified as not null, the column must be filled with some value. So if a column has been specified as not null, what you need to do? You need to give at least some value into that particular column. What is the syntax of not null constraint? The syntax is the normal table creation syntax, like create table, table name, then you will start the first bracket, column name, then data type, then after that you have to write the word not null. Not and null, these are two separate words and should not be combined together. It can be applied to more than one columns. So whatever columns you want to put as not null, after the data type you put these two words which is not null. So let's try to see this thing for ourselves practically. So this is the screen of MySQL. So let me create a database. At first, all of us know how to create a database. If you do not know how to create a database, look into my earlier videos. It has been explained sequentially, so you can look from there. So let's create a database. So create database. I'll give any name of the database. let's give the name of the database as organization. Okay, after that we have to use the database, so I'll give use organization. Okay, so I am inside the database organization now. Now let's create a table within this database. So create table, let me create a table student. Then we know how to create a table also. If you do not know table creation, then also you can look into my earlier videos. So create table student, let me give the column as roll number int. Let's say I do not want to leave roll number as blank. So what I'll give here, not null. Alright, so let's say I'll give here name Farker, let's say I'll give here 30. Let's say it may be blank, so I have not given not null constraint here. Let's say I'll give here class Farker. Let's say I do not want to leave the class blank, so I have to write this keyword not null. So I have, as you can see here, I have given the not null constraint into the columns roll number and class. So while entering data, it must be ensured that these two columns should not be left blank. Now let us insert values into the table by the syntax insert into table name is student, then values, let's give the roll number as 1, name as Alice, and class let me give as 10. So the value has been inserted. Now let's insert the second row. We know that values should be inserted row by row. Insert into student, values. Now in role I have given not null. Now let's try to give a null value into role. If you want to give a null value into a particular column, you have to write the word null without any quotes. Remember, if you give it with quotes, then it will be considered as a string. So we have to write the word null without any quotes. So let's try to leave roll number as null. So I have given here null, and name let's give as Bob, and class also let's give as 12. I'll press the enter key. As I have pressed the enter key, you can see that I am getting a error message here. What is the error message? The error message is column roll cannot be null. Why am I getting this error message? I am getting this error message because roll number I have specified as not null, but while entering values, I am trying to enter null values here. Similarly, let me try to insert another value, insert into student, values, let me give here roll number as 2, name as Bob. Now let me try to leave class as blank. For blank I have written null. So as I press the enter key, again I am getting the error column class cannot be null. Why column class cannot be null? Because while creating the table, I have specified class as not null. Therefore, while entering value, it must be ensured that it cannot be null. Now let us insert another value. This time I will try to leave the column name as null. Okay, so let's write insert into student, values, let's give roll number as 2, let's give name as null, and let's give the class as 10. See, it is accepting the value null for name. Why it is accepting the value null for name? Because I have not applied the constraint not null into the column name. I hope you have understood. Now if I display the table, select star from student, you can see that the rows where we tried to put null values for roll number and class, those are being discarded because of the constraint not null. So again I am repeating, not null constraint is used for those columns where you do not want to leave any value blank. Okay, if you want to give this constraint, you will use the two words not null after the data type of that particular column. Alright, that's about the not null constraint. Now let us go to the next type of constraint, which is the primary key constraint. I have already discussed about primary key in one of my earlier videos. So what is a primary key? A primary key is an attribute that can uniquely identify tuples within the relation. So if you want to ensure that each table must be identified uniquely, then you have to use the concept of primary key. So for unique identification, primary key is required. This constraint declares a column as the primary key of the table. So if you apply the primary key constraint, then it will declare that column as the primary key of the table. One necessary condition for primary key is that it does not allow null values. Remember, primary key cannot take null values. That means if you specify a column as primary key, then that column will not be able to take null value. It does not allow null values, hence must be applied to only those columns that are declared as not null. Alright, so this is the syntax for primary key constraint. So whenever you want to apply a primary key, just after the data type, as you can see, which is highlighted in blue color here, you will write these 4 words: not null, primary key. So whatever column you are specifying as primary key, that column cannot be duplicated. That means you cannot use repetitive values for that particular column, and also you cannot leave that particular column blank. So let's try to see it practically. So let's create a table here as staff. Create table staff. Now let's give here employee ID, EID, int. Let's say I want to put employee ID as primary key. Also remember that you should choose that column as the primary key which has no chance of repetition in the future. Employee ID, each employee in an organization has an unique employee ID. Therefore, it is better if we put employee ID as the primary key. Okay, so after int, what I'll do, I can write not null and then primary key. Okay, so it has been set as the primary key. Then let's give name Farker 30. All these data types are also being discussed in the previous videos. And let's give another as address. Let's give here as 100. So we have created the table staff with employee ID being the primary key. Now let's try to insert values here. Insert into staff values. Let's say first employee ID is 1001, name is, let's say, Alice, and address is, let's say, Assam. I am writing the address in short, so it's accepted. Let's write again insert into staff values. Let's give employee ID as 1002. Let's give the name as Bob and address let's give as Mumbai. Okay, so as you can see, it has been accepted. Now let's try to insert the third row. Insert into staff values 1003. Let's give this value as 1001. I'll change other things. Okay, let's give the name as Raj and address let's give as Bihar now. All right, now I'll press the semicolon and I'll press the enter key. But I'm getting an error here. Read the error message. Whenever you get the error message, try to read the error message. You will get more information about the error. So here, read the error. It says that duplicate entry 1001 for key primary. See, I have already assigned 1001 as an employee ID to one of the employees. So again, when I try to insert the same employee ID for a different employee, then I'm getting an error. Why am I getting an error? Because employee ID has been set as the primary key, and whatever column you are setting as the primary key, that column cannot be repeated. That means it must have unique values. Also, it cannot be null. Let me try to insert null values into this particular table now. Insert into staff values. Let's put the employee ID as null. Let's give the employee name as Raj and employee address as Bihar. Again, I am getting an error. Column EID cannot be null. Why it cannot be null? Because if I am setting a column as primary key, that cannot be duplicated. That means you cannot have repetitive values. Also, you cannot have null values. Alright. But other columns can have duplicate values or null values. So, if I write insert into staff values, now if I give the employee ID as 1003, employee name as Raj, and let's give the employee address as Assam and press the enter key. See, I am not getting any error even though I have used Assam as an address already. Why am I not getting an error? Because address is not the primary key here. Alright, so let's try to view the table, select star from staff. So after viewing the table, you can see that the ones where I got the errors, those are not being displayed here. So that's about the primary key constraint. Alright. Now let us go to the next type of constraint, which is the unique constraint. Now what is the meaning of the word unique? Unique means one. Unique means you cannot have duplicate values. So by the name it seems that unique constraint is similar to primary key, but no, it is not similar to primary key. Let's see how it is different. So this constraint ensures that no two rows have the same value in the specified column. So if you are applying a constraint as an unique, it ensures that no two rows of that particular column where you have given the unique constraint can be same. But the difference is that it allows null values. Try to compare it with primary key. Primary key does not allow null values, but unique constraint does allow null values. Multiple columns can be made as unique constraint. I'll give you an example, then you will see that you can apply unique constraint to more than one columns. But I'll show you practically that primary key cannot be applied to more than one columns. Alright, so this is the syntax for unique constraint. So whenever you want to give unique constraint, just write the word unique after the data type. Now putting that column as not null is optional. You can either choose to give it as not null or you may not give not null, because unique constraint can accept what values? It can accept null values. Now let us try to create a table and show you the concept of unique constraint. So let's create a table STU. Okay, I'm creating similar type of tables here. So let's give here roll number int unique. Okay, let's give name Farker 30. Let's give address Farker 100. Let's give here not null unique. Not null is optional in this case because unique constraint can take null values. So I have created the table STU with the columns role and address as unique constraints. So let me insert values here. Insert into table name, values role as 1, name let's give as Alice, and address let's give as Assam. It's fine, it's accepting the value. The first value always I'll give correct values. Insert into STU values, then let's give the roll number as null. Okay, let's give the name as Bob and let's give the address as Bihar. See, it's not showing me any error. It is taking null values. Why? Because this is not primary key. This is a unique constraint, and unique constraint can take null values into account. Alright. Now again let's create a table, insert into STU values. Let's try to give the roll number as 1, name as Raj. Let's try to give an address as, let's say, Mumbai. It is giving me error. Why? Because role is a unique constraint and I am trying to do what? I am trying to insert duplicate value for role, because one has been already assigned to Alice, but I am trying to give the role as one to Raj also. Therefore, I am getting here as error. Let me show you the next variation. Insert into STU values. Let's give the roll number as 2, name as Raj, and let's try to leave address as null. Here also I am getting an error, as column address cannot be null, because here in address column I have given two constraints. First is the not null, that means I cannot leave it blank. Second is the unique. So here you have to follow both the constraint. That means you must ensure that you do not give any null values. Also you must ensure that all the values are unique. So that's about the unique constraint. Select star from table name is STU. So as you can see, the table has been displayed here. Alright, I hope the unique constraint is clear. Now let us see the differences between unique and primary key constraint. This is a very important question with respect to FIVA also. So let's try to understand the difference between unique constraint and primary key constraint. I have already said, but just for a proper organization, I have given it here again in the form of a notes. So not null condition is not mandatory for this constraint. So here not null condition is not mandatory, because if you specify a constraint as unique, then it may accept null values also. On the other hand, in case of primary key constraint, not null condition is mandatory. Why not null condition is mandatory for this constraint? Because it's the necessary condition for primary key. If a column is primary key, then it cannot take duplicate values, also it cannot take null values into account. Next difference says that this constraint can be applied to multiple columns. So if there are more than one columns, what you can do, you can apply this unique constraint. But in case of primary key constraint, this constraint cannot be applied to multiple columns. You can apply primary key constraint only to one column, which I'll show you practically in a few moments. So for example, if I create a table where I apply unique constraint to more than one column, it is accepting. So I'm getting the message query OK, 0 rows affected. But if I try to create a table with two primary keys, here just pay attention to the table and see here in the roll number column I have made as primary key, the name column also I am trying to make it as primary key. But if I try to do so, I'll get an error. Read the error. The error says that multiple primary key defined. So you have to put only one column as the primary key. Let me show you this thing with an example. Let's create a table. ORG, I am creating any table and I am giving roll number int not null primary key. Let's give here as name Farkar 100. Let's give here address Farkar 100. Let's give here again not null primary key. Then I press the enter key. See, I am getting an error here. The error says multiple primary key defined. See, I am trying to make roll number as primary key. I am trying to make address also as primary key, which is not acceptable. Therefore, I am getting the error message as multiple primary key defined. Alright, that's about the differences between unique and primary key constraint. Let's go to the last constraint of this video, which is the default constraint. So I think you know about the word default. What is default? Now whenever you purchase a new mobile, for example from the shop, whenever you switch on the mobile, it will have some kind of ringtone, it will have a wallpaper and it will have some settings. What are those settings called? Those settings are called as the default settings. Default means something which is there from before itself. But if you want, you can change the ringtone, you can change the this one wallpaper, and you can change many other settings. So default constraint is such a constraint where a particular column can be given a default value. So this constraint is used to specify a default value for a particular column. If you want to specify a default value for a particular column, then you need to specify the default constraint. For that, the keyword used is default. So the default keyword is used to assign default values to a particular column. If you want to assign default value to a particular column, then you have to use the default keyword. How to use it? I'll show it to you practically in a few moments from now. Now see, if you do not change the ringtones and wallpapers of your mobile, it will remain as it is, but if you want, you can change it. Okay, so the default value is used only in those cases in which the user does not enter a value for the column having a default value. So if the user does not enter a value for that column where that user has given as the default value, only then the default value will be taken into account. But if a user enters some value from outside for default column also, then the value inserted by the user will be taken into consideration. Let's try to understand it with the help of an example. Before that, let's see the syntax. This is the syntax. Whatever column you want to give default value, give some default value. After the data type, you use the keyword default, then leave a space blank, and then you write the default value. If the default value is an integer, then you write the value without quotes, but if it is a string, you have to write the default value within quotes itself. Understood? So let's try to observe it practically. So let's create a table. Let's create the same table, Urja. Okay, let's give roll number int. Okay, I'll not give any other constraint here. Let's give name Farker. Here I am giving what? I am giving name as 100. Let's give the address here, address Farker 100. Let's say I want to put a default value for address. Let's say I want to put the default value as Assam. So if someone does not enter the value for address, then Assam will automatically come. So how to give the set a default value? So I'll write the keyword default, and after that I will write my default value, whatever value I want to keep as default. I want to keep Assam as the default value. So here within quotes I'll write Assam, then I'll press the enter key and I'll complete the table. Now how to use it? Insert into table name Urja values. Let's give roll number as 1, let's give name as alias. Let's enter some address from our side. Let's give the address as Mumbai. So yes, it will be accepted. But for the second person, let's say I want to give the address as Assam. How to use it? Let us see. I'll write insert into table name values. Let's say I give the roll number as 2, name as Bob. Now I want to use the default value. So you give a comma and write the word default without any quotes. Remember, without any quotes. If you give quotes, then it will be considered as a string. I am writing the word default. So whenever you want to use the default value, write the word default without any quotes. Then you press the semicolon and press the enter key. Yes, the row has been affected. Insert it. Let's insert another value. Values. Let's give 3. Let's give Raj. Let's say now I do not want to use default value, I want to use another value. So let's give another value. In next time, let's say I want to insert some value. So let's give some value here 4. Let's give the name as Ankita. Let's say I want to use default value again. So I'll use the default keyword, press the semicolon and press the enter key. So as you can see, it has been it has accepted all my commands without any error. Now let's display the table and see if it is working as expected or not. Yes, it is working as expected. See here, for the second row, I have written insert into org values to Bob default. Whenever I use default, the word Assam has come here. In the last row also, I have used the word default. So what has come here? Assam. Why Assam has come here? Because as you can see here, in the table creation for the address column, I have put the default constraint and I have put the default value as Assam. So whenever some value has been inserted from outside, yes, that value will come. But if no values are inserted, then you please write the word default and the default values will come into your particular table. Okay. So that's all for today. I hope that this session was useful. I'll see you again with a different topic. Thank you very much.